I really believe in the power of being open and talking, and I'm lucky enough to kind of share that connection with a few people in this circle.
Our own mental health is so personal to ourselves, we struggle to talk to other people about it, and therefore everyone thinks they're suffering on their own.
I wanted to be able to embrace my pain, and I wanted to be able to manifest something from the tears that I was shed. And so I decided that I would go and train to be a therapist.
My journey with starting to be able to express myself through my problems was with talking therapy. So yours was on the back end, mine was the first thing. But I remember that and I say this now, I overall saw that therapist, that counsellor in Cambridge for 1.5 years. And I look back and I honestly do not know who I would be without having had that experience.
If we all had a greater understanding on how to manage our own emotional well-being and how to support others in their emotional well-being, and we were taught that at school, I think it would make a real difference. And I think the years we spend in education and we come out with all of this useless knowledge that you don't use in everyday life, yet there's nothing being taught about emotional well-being or mental health.
Well, most recently I did some training with Mind, the mental health charity, to develop a new programme that's going to be rolled out into schools, going in and talking about our story to kids of different ages to kind of help inspire them to talk about anything that they might need to talk about, and just open up that conversation a little bit more and make it a little bit more safe, I guess. Instead of their teachers just saying, you should talk about your feelings, kind of having some other people coming in and just sharing stories and showing that everyone has mental health.
I feel like mindfulness and yoga have all the tools to help facilitate problems that maybe happen to me now, but I had none of those tools when I was younger. So for me, depression's, I guess, a manifestation of not having the opportunities to speak and really express how I feel.
So much of the issues that we see, the so-called problems that we see, are to do with disconnection, like disconnection from each other, from the world, but also from ourselves.
I still struggle with depression, not as deeply as that first time, but I kind of feel really strongly, and this is why I think opportunities for us to come together as just human beings and speak about this is so important, because I feel like in this period of transition that we're in, where we're leaving the old way of things, we know that, as Charles Eisenstein says, we know that normal isn't coming back. But so as we leave that old way and we can see the new on the horizon, but it's not yet there, we're all going through these intense, immense kind of shedding and grieving, but also terrified about what lies ahead and what is to come.
Where am I at the moment? I was quite overawed by the list of people when I looked down and just what everyone's doing professionally. I'm going through quite a difficult few years it's been. I've worked in journalism for 15 years. Ended up being a sub-editor at the Times and The Guardian eventually, and I was always interested in spirituality, psychedelics and culture around psychedelics, and I suppose you would call it in very broad terms left-wing politics, and thought somehow that in working within the mainstream media that these things would be able to be more integrated and I'd be able to write about these things, and found, whether through my lack of confidence or the resistance which actually I feel is there, it was very difficult to put forward any ideas which were spiritual, and that's a really broad term that I use to cover everything from yoga to meditation to ecstatic dance.
The big word that I'm hearing is awareness, and I think what would be amazing is to create a space where you could unfold and unpack the awareness of what is going on without having a label. So creating a safe space or a safe net where people can explore and speak out. There's probably multiple ways to do that if you have money, by paying a therapist, a coach, and so on and so forth. But some people just don't have the time or just don't have the money.
I skipped an art class once to go and be with my boyfriend and they were like, Georgia, they literally, it was almost like apocalyptic, like, we need to sit you down, like, what's going on? And they were like, you need to see someone. I know, literally. So anyway, but it was like the best blessing ever, because I remember I sat down and I was like, I really don't know why I'm here, like I don't know what to talk about. And this woman was amazing, and so after a couple of weeks she kind of coaxed it out of me. And I realised that I started to talk about my relationship with my mother. And I didn't talk about anything but my relationship with my mother for a year. And I, honestly, again, I don't know who I'd be without it. Of course, our parents are like gods in our eyes when we're growing up. And we, in a way, we underestimate the effect that our relationship with them has on in our life. It takes a long time before we can start to see them as human beings, like fellow human beings, rather than these, I suppose, infallible gods.
What I think is like the most important thing for me personally and the people that I engage with on a regular basis is that they know what's available to them, and then they know to push and ask for help, because I think that sometimes when you do go to the doctors, you say, oh, I'm feeling sad, their first intervention is giving you drugs, and it's not necessarily saying, okay, well, let's have a conversation about that, because they've only got 10 minutes and they're a GP and they much prefer to be talking about a physical ailment, that's something that's mental, because it's not really their capacity.
Figuring out what works, bring out the best in us as human beings, and then sharing it with as many people as we can with love and respect and humility, knowing that everyone's different, but also we're all really the same as well. So yeah, I feel like I'm at a very early stage of my journey in this area, but feel very, I guess, just really inspired by the people I've met.
James and I actually only met for the first time today, but we've had this sort of online connection for years, and I've always felt this really strong alignment with his project, because it's rooted in everything I've worked on in the last few years. Everything comes back to is the human connection. That's what we're lacking, and that's where we need to root ourselves and begin again, essentially, which is that just heart-to-heart, vulnerable openness. And what's blocking us from that, which is why I'm interested in Brené Brown, is shame. And shame has gripped us all individually, but also is, I feel, present in every aspect of our society. And in fact, I feel like our society cannot survive without that embedded shame. It's like it's relying on it, and there's this kind of cycles of like just this deep sense lack of worth that we all have. And so these conversations of just human beings coming together and sharing is so important.
There's so much to learn from everybody, and I think really the last years I've really realised the power of presence and what that allows people to connect with and share. I also believe that, mental health is a word that, it's funny because it's a positive word, actually, isn't it? Health. But it has very negative connotations, and I really firmly believe that everybody's on the scale. I think it's used in association with quite extreme cases often, and people that have kind of, everyday mental health things kind of call it other things, stress, or, I've just been really busy, and every single day, I think through presence, I connect with people, and I just see it all the time. I was at the optician's this morning and ended up having a conversation with a young guy who seemed really wound up at the reception desk, and we ended up having really in-depth conversation about how he's actually really struggling with anxiety and depression at the moment. And I find it immensely sad that people don't have the arenas to talk about this stuff, because it is so normal. I have yet, in my adventures all over the world, to meet somebody that hasn't had some encounter somewhere on that scale, whether it is feeling too busy, feeling, at capacity, or whether they've got a life curveball, whether it's from themselves or death in the family. We all experience these things, and the more we give it voice and share our experiences, the more we realise that this stuff is entirely normal. And so I think spaces like this, and with great people like you behind, are so important, because we need to normalise this stuff. It just needs to be as normal as talking about the weather